Hey there and welcome back. I did a video a while back about how object collisions work in NESmaker. And among all of my videos, that's the one who got the most dislikes. Now, it's not bad, like it's not 50% dislikes. I think it's 97% likes, something like that, so it's really good, right? But the most people it's the video where the most people clicked dislike. So I went back and I watched that video, and I didn't like it too much myself, actually. So what I want to do right now is to make a new and improved version about object collision in NESmaker, but I want to simplify it. I want to make it super simple, so that if you want to make some custom thing where the objects collide, you want to make something happen there, then I want to make it really simple for you. So let's just start by looking at this little test game that I made here. So let's see. There we go. So here we go. This little test game, Santa Collision. So, by the way, this is a fairly vanilla NESmaker game. Now, as you can see, I've added some effect here, and I've added two monster AI. So you'll see that right now. So I've added a monster shoot thing here, where the monster can shoot, and I've added something where this guy drops this present. Those are very two basic things. We're not gonna go into that right now, but here you can see we have a test game. I'm walking around, I'm picking up these packages, but as you can see, I can't be hurt by these snowballs from this snowball cannon. So I can just, just go right through them. And I can pick up these presents, but nothing really happens. So I'm picking up presents, I'm going right through these snowballs. Not really exciting. Not really a game. So what I want to do, I want to make sure that these monster projectiles actually do hurt me. I need to change the collision so that I can be hurt by monster projectiles. Because as you can see now, they just go right through me. And this package, or this Christmas present, that's a pickup object. So right now I'm picking this up and it goes away, but nothing really happens. So what I want to do, I want to make sure that I'm hurt by these snowballs. I want, when Santa picks up this present, I want him to do a little happy dance. So I want to do those two things. And to do that, excuse me, to do that, I need to change something about the object collision in this game. And by the way, this is pretty much default NESmaker. This is how default NESmaker is set up. And by the way, this is the Metrovania module. So in the Metrovania module, you can make monster weapons, but the player can't be hurt by them. Now I'm guessing that that's something that Joe just forgot. He forgot to add collision between the player and the monster projectile. And when it comes to this pickup object, well, that's not Joe's fault. I mean, he couldn't have guessed what I wanted to do in my game, so he kind of left that open for us. But you can pick up objects, and you basically have to decide yourself what you want to happen. Like I said, I want Santa to go into a happy dance when he picks up this present. So two things. I want to get hurt by monster projectiles. I want a happy dance when Santa collects this present. But before we go deeper into this, let's look at some concepts here when it comes to object collision. So by default, this is how, for the Metrovania module in NESmaker, this is how object collisions work. So basically we just have two different collisions. We have collisions for the player projectile and we have collisions for the player object. Now for the player projectile, all we're checking against is it a monster object? That's all that collision does for the player projectile. So if the player projectile collides with a monster, then we run the code do handle hurt monster. That's all that happens for the player projectile. Now we can add other things of course, but this is how the default is set up. So what about the player? Well, the player has three types of collisions by default. So the player can collide with a monster, he can collide with a pickup object, or he can collide with an NPC. That's how default NESmaker is set up in the Metrovania module. So if the player collides with a monster, then we run do handle hurt player, the code that's in there. But if the player collides with a pickup object, then we run whatever is in the pickup script. We have to come back to that in just a moment. And then we have a collision where the player collides with an NPC. Now all that happens when a player collides with an NPC is that we're stopping the player movement. Nothing else happens. You might think that, well, that's when we trigger some text or something like that. No, that does not happen in the object collision code. If you want to trigger some text, then that's in the some kind of input script. So in the collision script, when the player collides with an NPC, we just stop the player movement. So he has three collisions. The player has three collisions: monster, pickup, and NPC. We only check against those three. But what's this thing over here on the left? Well, this is what I want to add to my game, to this Santa game. I want to add a new collision between the player and a monster projectile, because that check is not there by default in the Metrovania module. So when the player collides with a monster projectile, I want to run the exact same code that I do when the player collides with a monster. In other words, I want the player to get hurt. Because you remember, when the player collides with a monster, we run do handle hurt player. I want to do that when the player collides with a monster projectile as well. So you can see here I added do handle hurt player. So we have two types of collision checks: player projectile and player. And we need to add a new check for the player against monster projectile. So this, what I'm going to show you how to do this, is super simple. So what you need to do to access the object collision script is to go to project settings and script settings. So the object collision script is way down here at the bottom, under where it says subroutines. So what we're looking for is handle object collisions. So select handle object collisions and click edit. Now I've modified this slightly just to make it obvious how this works, this object collision script, how that works. So if we scroll down a little bit here, then you can see how I've labeled this. So first of all, like I said, we're starting with the player weapon. So here's the code where we check for the player weapon. And how do we know that we're checking the player weapon? Well, with LDA object flags, X. So we're loading the object flag for this particular object that's active right now. And we say load object flags and with a 1 here. So why a 1 here? Well, these zeros and ones are actually, let's take a look. If you look at the player object and we go to object details here and details over here, we have these monster flags over here. We have persistent, player, player weapon, and so on. So we have these checkboxes. We have 8 checkboxes. Now this is really simple actually, because if a checkbox is checked, then it's a 1. If it's not checked, then it's a 0. And we know that a byte, 1 byte, that's 8 zeros and ones. So this is just 1 byte. This is the monster flag byte for this object. That means that we have 8 zeros and ones here for the monster flag. Right now I've checked persistent and player. Now I don't have any player projectiles in my game. So when the code reaches this, it's going to say load object flags, X, and with a 1 here. And by the way, we have persistent, player, player weapon, monster, monster weapon. So we start from the right here, go to the left, and let's see if we can put them side by side. So if I do it this way, then we can see that this 0 here at the right, when we're loading in the object flags, this 0 all the way at the right, that's this top checkbox, persistent. Then this next 0, that's this one, the checkbox that's called player. The next digit here, in this case it's a 1, that's this one, player weapon. So that's how we check if this is a player weapon or not. So you can see the correlation between the code and the interface there. Right, but in this case I'm not checking for a player weapon. I don't have any player weapons. And if we continue down here, you can see that for the player weapon we only have 1 check. We're checking against a monster. And again, we're using object flags and this AND thing here. And we have persistent, player, player weapon, and then monster. That's why we have a 1 there. So if it is a monster, then we run the do handle hurt monster code, like we talked about. So that's all that's happening for the player weapon, as you remember from the drawing. And then we get down here, where we check collisions for the player. Now same thing, below objects flags, and we have persistent, player. So this one right here means the player flag. This one, player flag. Right, so is this a player? Well, if it is, then we go down here and then we start the other checks. What are we checking against? The first thing we are checking against is this other object, is that a monster? Well, if it is a monster, then we run do handle hurt player. Okay, so I've I've actually done something here. I'm gonna come back to that. Sorry about that. But for the player, we have a collision between the player and the monster, between the player and the pickup, and the player and the NPC, like you remember from the drawing. So 3 collisions for the player. So we can add another one like this below, for example, this player NPC collision. So we can add another collision like that, like copy one of these and modify them and say, is the player colliding with a monster projectile? Because that's the collision we want to add, right? But that's gonna take up a little extra space, because all code all the code is going to take up space. But there's a much simpler way to add a collision between a player and a monster projectile. Don't have to do that. We don't have to copy this whole thing and paste it below. So I'm going to show you something really simple now. So I'm going to go back up to player monster collision. So remember these flags, object flags, right? We have persistent player weapon, monster weapon, which means this 0 right here, that's the one that represents this checkbox. Let's see if we can get it back side by side. So we are talking about object flags. By the way, object flags and monster flags, that's the same thing. But we have, start here at the top, persistent player weapon, persistent player weapon, monster right there, and then monster weapon, the next checkbox, which is this one. What we can do right now, we can actually just change this 0 to a 1, which is basically the same as checking a checkbox here. So instead of just checking, are we colliding with a monster, we're checking, are we colliding with a monster or a monster object. We're checking a collision between both of those, because we're saying load the object flags, and we're ending with a 1 here and a 1 there. Then we're saying branch if not equal is player monster collision. So we go down here and we actually do the collision stuff. So that means that if either one of these two is a 1, then we go down here. Again, if it's a monster or if it's a monster projectile, then we run the hurt player code. So this is all we need to do. Change this 0 to a 1. Persistent player weapon, monster weapon. That's all we need to do to make sure that the monster projectile can hurt the player. But usually you would want something like, oh, the monster projectile collides with a player, but usually you would want that monster projectile to go away. Now, if we use the same code for the monster and the monster projectile, then we have to do a little tweak here. Because if the monster collides with a player, I'm guessing that usually you don't want the monster to go away. Even if the player is hurt, you don't want the monster to go away. I don't know a lot of games that do it that way. So, which means we have to add a check. First we check, is this a monster or a monster projectile? If it's either of those two, then we continue and we do this hurt code. But when we get further down here, we need to do this. We need to add another check. We know that there's a collision that happened right now, and it's either a monster or a monster projectile, but we're not quite sure right now because we did a check. We checked for both of those at the same time up here. So we need to add another check down here. LDA object flags and I'm gonna add an and for just the monster weapon. So LDA object flags and an and with a 1 for the monster weapon. Branch if equal. If it's a 0, if the checkbox for monster weapon is not checked, then we continue on. But if it is checked, which means this is a monster weapon, then we destroy that monster weapon object. So because of this little extra check here, we can make sure that the player is colliding with something. Is it a monster? Well, if it is, then the player will get hurt and the monster just continues on. If the player collides with a monster projectile, the player is still hurt, but the monster projectile goes away. That's what we're doing here. And to do that, all we need to do, like I said, is just change for the player monster collision here. Just need to change this 0 to a 1. You remember how those work, right? And just to make sure that the monster projectile goes away, we need to add this little extra check. Load object flags and end it with a 1 for the monster weapon. So if it is a monster weapon, then we destroy it. So let's see if that works. So now I should be hurt by the monster projectile, and the monster projectile should go away. So let's see if that happens. So, all right, yeah. So I'm getting hurt. Oh, I'm getting hurt by the monster projectiles, and it goes away. And if you can see up here, I'm actually losing health. So we're actually running the hurt player code. I'm hurt by the monster projectiles. Great, so that's 1 out of 2. Now I'm colliding with monster projectiles and I get hurt. Now I need to add something for this pickup object, this present. Now, if we go back to the object collision code, we know we have the main collision for the player here, and then we have these 3 things. Actually, I should add something like monster and monster weapon, because this part of the code is checking both of those right now. So that's the one, and then we have this thing. Are we colliding with a pickup object? Well, if we are colliding with a pickup object, as you can see, that pickup object is destroyed. That's why we could pick up the present. The Santa could pick up the present and it went away, but nothing else happened. So it's always going to go away unless you remove this thing. But then we see something here. Include SCR pickup scripts. That means that we basically put whatever's in the pickup script right here. So let's go back to NESmaker right now. Let's go to Project Settings, Script Settings. And let's go down to where it says Game, which is almost here at the middle. We have this thing called Game. So under Game, we have something called Pickup Script. If we select Pickup Script now and click Edit, then we get this default pickup script that Joe made. Now this is just a really simple sample pickup script, and it may or may not match your game. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this. I'm going to remove all of this except the heading pickup script. And then I have some custom code down here that I've added. So instead of the default pickup script, I'm going to do basically the same thing, which is I'm loading LEA object type, x. So object type, that's another property of different objects. And by the way, object type, that means what number is the object. So the first one here, which is the player, that's object type 0. Gift pickup in my case, That's object type 1. So we have object type 0, object type 1, object type 2, object type 3, and so on. All the way down to this one, which is object type 15. Then we have monster graphic banks, where we have our monsters. And if we're using object type, which starts from 0 and goes all the way down to 15 here, when we get to monsters, we just continue counting. So we go from 14, 15, and then 16. So the first monster is object type 16, 16, 17, and so on. So the first 16 objects is going to be object type 0 all the way to 15. 0, 1, 2. So when I say load object type and then I compare it with 1, what I'm actually saying is whatever object is loaded in right now, is it object type 1? And that's this one. So is it object type 1? Branch if not equal, not this pickup. So if it's not this object, then I just go down here and I don't run this other code. But if it is object type 1, then we go here. So what I've done here, I just added some simple thing like adding more health. So I did that really simple. I just say load my health, compare it with my max health, and then I say BCS no more health. So if my health is equal or greater than my max health, then I just go down here, no more health. So my health and my max health, I'm sure you know this, but let's just do a quick repetition. These are two user variables. We have my health and we have my max health. Now at the beginning here, they're both going to be 3. So basically this means that if I have full health, then I'm not going to increase my health anymore. So that's just a really simple thing to add health to my game for a pickup. Then we go down here. We're still at this collision with object type 1, this gift. So what happens here? Well, we're changing action step for player 1 object. Changing that action step to action step 5, which is this little dance. So when I pick up this present, or Santa picks up this present, he's going to get health. If he has max health, then he's not going to get any more health, but he's going to get health if he needs it. And then it's going to go into action step 5. So if we go back to player object details, you can see here for action step 5, I've set up a dance animation. It's just going to stop moving for 6 time units with a certain animation speed. After that, it just goes to first, which is action step 0. So, of course, we have to set up some sort of dance animation here. So, it's really simple. We collide with object type 1, we increase health if we need it, and we go to action step 5. So I'm going to save this one, and I'm going to run this game. So now I should be hurt by the snowballs, and when I pick up this present, I'm going to get health, but Santa's also going to go into this little happy dance. So let's see if that works. So first of all, Let's get hurt. So now I have just 1 health, as you can see up here. I've been hurt twice. So let's see what happens when I pick up this present here. Yep, Santa went into his little happy dance there, and I did in fact get health. So get hurt again, and Santa goes into this happy dance. Actually, he went twice into his happy dance. But he still goes into his happy dance even if his health is full. Because, whoops, that's how we set up this, that's how we set up our code here. So he's always going to go into action step 5. The only thing we're going to skip is increase my health if he has full health. But it's always going to go into action step 5, which is what's happening right here. So now we have added 2 types of collision. One for a monster projectile and one for a pickup object. So this whole thing is just to show you that first of all, that you know where to find the object collision script setting, project settings, script settings, and all the way down here under subroutines, handle object collisions. That's the main object collision script, where, as you know, we have 2 main collision types for the player weapon and for the player, and each of those have sort of collision types, if you want to call it that. For the player weapon, we only check against the monster. For the player, we check against the monster, pickup, and NPC. But of course, we also added here for the monster, we also added a collision for monster weapon. So the reason this is so important that I decided to make another video about this is because object collisions, that's where you can add so many interesting things for your game. So as you can see, you can do all kinds of stuff. In this case, it was making Santa go into a little happy dance when he picked up a pickup object. And by the way, pickup objects, that's a little special because for something like hurt the player, like this, we're colliding with a monster, we run the hurt player code like this. For the pickup objects, we have this whole pickup script in here. So we need to program the logic for the pickup, whatever we want to happen for the pickup objects in our pickup script. So in this case, I'm comparing with this one, but we can add as many checks as we want. So for example, I could add another one down here, which is compare with 2, and it could be whatever. Branch if not equal, not this pickup, something like that. So if I had another pickup object here, 0, 1, 2, if I had another pickup object here, then I could add some code for that by comparing with 2, since we're loading object type here at the beginning of the pickup script. Alright, well, that's it for this video. So, I don't know if I'll get the time to make another video before the end of the year. So, we'll see. But if I don't, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And then we'll see if I'll meet you another time before the year is over. But anyway, have a great day and bye bye.